how the defense was. I think the bigger surprise to me was Javon Hargrave stepping up. The way he played
He
last week,
did.
he
Yeah.
finally came up and showed up. When you're getting paid $20 million a year, you got to show up like that. Now Nick Bosa came alive. Chase Young though, like the Niners
That
have to
was a
re-sign
good
him.
addiction. That was a good addition. Like, I know it's only been 1 week, so who knows? But the way that that was able to open up Bosa, the way that I felt like they played off and motivated each other, it's really it's silly because these people are making hundreds of millions of dollars, and when you look at them, you think that you need to have, they should have that intrinsic motivation by themselves, but at the end of the day, this is a game and it is a job. And when you think about yourself and how you perform when you're playing with your friend or when you're hanging out with your friends or when you're competing with a peer in your work, it really does motivate you to try harder, even if you should have that intrinsic drive within yourself. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like we saw that, just in the little clips. They even had like voice clips of the two of them talking back and forth, kind of being like, I was the one that got him first. No, I was the one that got him first. And, you hope that they carry. I think as long as health permits for Chase Young, everything that I've heard about him is that he's been really good. And it seems like maybe those, I know Mike Silver wrote an article about his attitude or whatever. To me, that's a Washington problem. Trent Williams has talked a lot about the culture in Washington. I feel like stuff like that doesn't fly under Chris Kosarek. And um, you're right. I'll ask you that. Do you think that they'll try to find a way to extend him if he
You
has
have
to
to.
continue his
You
play
have to.
continues?
There's no way you got to make it work. It was funny because you and we talked about how the addition of Chase Young was going to be like working with your best friend. Like it's different. Like when you're working with your best friend, you're in an environment that's healthy for you. You play better. You look re energized. That's what Nick Bosa looked like. You look re energized. You look at the videos on them on the bench. You see Chase Young
Yeah.
lean his head on Nick Bosa for a little while. Like it's comfortable. He's comfortable right now, and he wasn't comfortable
Yeah.
in Washington. Obviously, there was a lot of things going on there from the moment he was drafted.
Fair, to be
Um,
honest.
absolutely. So when you look at it, like when you're going through things mentally, especially when you're dealing with an injury, you're not going to be playing up to your best potential. You're recovering from a big injury. But looking at what they looked like, there's you got to do what you got to do to re-sign them. Pairing him and Nick Bosa together for the next 5 years, you're able to start reducing a little bit on the interior, because obviously you're not going to want to pay uh, two defensive tackles in the 20 million range. But I
Yeah.
would do everything in my power to keep Chase Young around for a long time, because you give up a third round pick. Now, if you let him walk, you probably get a third round comp back, but you gotta re-sign him. To me, it's a must. Like if you don't re-sign him, you're letting go a high quality player, and that's what you don't want to do. In my opinion, I personally would make it work, and in the long run, push it back where everything is back ended on the contract. And if you have to eventually trade Debo Samuel, not if you don't extend Talanoa Hufanga, like there's a lot of things that are in play. I'm like, I personally am prioritizing Chase Young over Hufanga, who's an All Pro, who I could
I like that.
potentially
Yeah.
trade.
He's gonna get like I feel like Huff, when you're in his position, those guys get paid a lot. And because he's already had an all pro selection, I don't think, and I
Mm-hmm.
love Hufunga's attitude, but I don't think maybe he's playing up to his hype. Not that he's not playing well, but I think with the Troy Polamalu, like he has a bit of a reputation, and I think those things can add money to the contract that you're going to end up getting. Um,
Absolutely.
I've heard some people hypothesize maybe that's why Jair Brown is here. I know that obviously Gibson, they might have to have someone like come and fill in for that spot too, because he's obviously older. But you're right. Do you think that they'll have to do like? Do you think, because you're talking about re-signing Chase Young, that it would have to be an either or for Brandon Aiyuk or Chase Young, or
Yeah.
do you think that that's something they could work out with? Because the way that Debo's contract flows, I think next year they can have both Aiyuk and Debo around the same price, and it might be the next year that they have to make a decision about that.
So I think Brandon Ayuk's around a long time. The reason is I was explaining to Frau, who was a buddy as we're texting back and forth. Um, it might have been Jesse Naylor and David Lichty who we were texting and we're talking about how Brandon Ayuk um, should be around, or what do they do in this situation. I'm like, to be honest, I've always been pro player. I think players should sit out and get their money. But at the same time, if I'm trying to look at what's going on and look at the situation, if I'm the 49ers, I look at Brandon Ayuk and I'm like, well, tough luck. You're on your 5th-year option. I'm going to figure out how to extend Chase Young, and then we'll come to you. Once we figure out Chase Young and we have money, we'll move around money. We'll get your contract done. Don't worry about that. I think with his 5th-year option, 5th year, I think the starting point is around 15 million, because obviously that's where his 5th-year option is. I think he's going to get in the 20s. I think that's how good of a receiver he is. But at that time, once you're discussing that, a lot of things come into play. He might request a trade. He might do this, might do that.
Yeah.
I'm allowing him to request his trade if I'm the team. Okay, cool. If you could give
Seeing
me
what
back,
kind of offer he would
yeah,
bring
if you could
back,
give me
that makes
back,
sense.
if you could give me back XYZ, um, cool. We'll think about it. But at this
Yeah.
point, you're a 49er. You're on your 5th-year option, and we could tag you next year if we want. That's how I'm seeing it. If I'm the 49ers,
Yeah.
I don't have
Like
to
that.
move you. I don't have to extend you this offseason. You are a 49er. It sucks that we drafted you in the first round and there's a 5th-year option where we don't have to extend you. That's how I'm looking at it as a team perspective. But if I'm Brandon Ayuk, I'm like, I'm your best receiver on this roster. You better pay me, and rightfully
Yeah.
so. So if he requests a
It'll be
trade,
interesting. It'll be interesting to me how fans kind of receive that if he does kind of fight back. Just because I feel like I've been so interested in, and this is kind of a conversation for the off season, but in how the way these different contracts have been perceived when it comes to the way that Debo handled things, and then Bosa. I wonder how fans will react with Brandon Ayuk, because I kind of do feel like he's a bit of a fan favorite. But if I'm putting myself in my head, when Debo did get that contract, Debo was a giant fan favorite up until people kind of noticed that he was disgruntled. And in my opinion, Brandon Ayuk is their most consistent wide receiver, but he hasn't shown the ability, and that's bad wording. He hasn't been given the opportunity, maybe, to show the
opportunity.
ability to take over games in the same way that Debo has. Now, I don't necessarily think that's like a con- condemn condemnation. That's not a word. I don't think that that's Brandon Ayuk's fault necessarily. I think that might be the way this offense is set up with this quarterback, with this play caller, and the things that they like to call it. The scheme is more set for Debo to be able to take a guy who plays like Debo to be able to take over than Brandon Ayuk, because I know there's so many metrics that he's one of the most wide open receivers, and in the red zone. Steph Sanchez pointed this out to me. This was before the game that just happened, so these stats might be skewed a little bit, but Debo, right behind Christian McCaffrey, has the most red zone targets out of any player on the 49ers team. And he actually
Yeah,
doesn't have a touchdown from the red zone. His only touchdowns have came outside of the red zone, where Brandon Aiyuk has a touchdown on every single one of his red zone opportunities where he's been given the ball in the red zone. He just has only been targeted in the red zone at that point. Once again, this was before last week. At that point, it was 3 targets that were in the red zone. He's obviously been targeted more than that outside of the red zone. But I thought that was kind of, I'm like, Kyle Shanahan, why are you not, and or Brock Purdy, whatever that
what's
communication
crazy?
is, why are you not giving him the opportunity when he's showing you that when given those chances, he's going to make you right? I mean, I think you and I have had that same discussion when it comes to George Kittle. It's like, hey, when you give him the opportunity, he steps up the plate. Wouldn't that, like, isn't that how football's supposed to work? Like, you passed the
Yeah.
test, so now I'm going to give you more. Where I feel like in Kyle's mind, he's like, good job for passing the test. Come back to you in 3 weeks. I'm going to throw 4 more targets to Debo and hand the ball off to Christian McCaffrey 27 more times. So,
And what's crazy is the conversation got brought up, right, about Brandon Ayuk a few weeks ago because of Larry Kruger, who essentially said he's having a midseason because of
mhm,
his expectations he had in August, right? Next
mhm,
following week, they throw a touchdown pass to him. They target him in the red zone.
yeah,
Good
yeah,
things
yeah,
happen when you target great players. Like, good things happen when you put the ball in great players' hands. And in my opinion, I think Brandon Ayuk is the best receiver on the team, and it's not close. There's no shade to Debo Samuel. He's a hell of a receiver. But I think the 49ers have a top 10 receiver in Brandon Ayuk. Like, and it's not, if you give him the opportunities and you're starting to target him like a top 10 receiver, you're going to see those numbers increase drastically. The fact that he's been targeted um, more than 7 times, only 2 times this year or 3 times this year out of all those games is insane. One of the games was the first game of the season. He was 8 for 8, 8 catches on 8 targets for 129 and 2 touchdowns. The next couple of games where he's targeted more than 7 times was the Cleveland game where Brock played really bad. He had 76 yards. And then the next time he was targeted more than the 7 times, he was 5 for 9 for 109 in that Cincinnati Bengals game. So when you target him, he has been proven the more you target Brandon Aiyuk in a game, the more he gets going. So for me, I think Brandon Aiyuk is going to be around for a very long time. I think Kyle loves him for his offense. So I'm very excited to see Brandon Aiyuk in this kind of offense for a long time, especially um, with Brock Purdy. They're going to continue to develop more chemistry. You may start seeing the go ball implemented a little bit more now that Brock Purdy's feeling a little more comfortable throwing it to George Kittle.
Yeah.
You might see that implemented. That's a very strong suit of Brandon Aiyuk. But I'm excited to see the team